Hello and welcome to today's live session broadcast for the edX Marketing Analytics MicroMasters series. My name is Stefan Sorger.
And my name is Yulia. I am one of the course facilitators who monitors your questions in the discussion forum.
Today, what we'll be doing is looking at your questions, the ones that you gave us in the conference windows for different questions, as well as the forums. We see questions pop up again and again. Well, we'll be answering them. In addition to that, we have live question answering capabilities. We'll be monitoring. I can actually see in front of me a text box that shows all the questions that are coming in real time, and we'll be answering those as well. And for today's topics, we'll be talking about coffee, because we both love coffee, and moving. So one of us has moved already. The other one of us is going to be moving pretty shortly. And I know this is the big season for moving. So when it comes to looking at different applications for things and looking for examples, that's going to be today's topic. So we're going to start off with some questions. So what we've done is we've printed out some of the questions that you've asked. You've reached out to us to answer in these live sessions, and we'll be talking about those. Question one, I found it very interesting that towards the final remarks, you referred to Salesforce dashboards as automation systems that provide metrics that give actionable insights for our decision-making process. Yes, I did. That's in chapter 1 toward the end. Since SFDC, that's salesforce.com, dashboards can be customized according to our needs, it would be interesting to hear about some key metrics that can be configured in this tool to facilitate data analysis. And could you expand on the topic of metrics dashboards overall? That's a great question. So one of the things that you're going to be doing as an analyst is almost certainly developing a dashboard for your organization or company. And of course, every company is going to be different. Every industry is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. And yet I can provide some guidelines. One of the things I did is I looked at a paper here from salesforce.com, and it's called Select Your Sales Metrics. So to get that, you would Google salesforce.com, Select Your Sales Metrics. So the full title is Select Your Sales Metrics. Which ones are most important for your team? I read the paper, and I would say it's consistent with what most organizations do. And in here, it has two categories. One, just a list of 6 important sales metrics, and then 2, questions and metrics based on the structure of the organization. So we'll talk about both. So first of all is the 6 important sales metrics. And of course, this can vary from organization to organization. That being said, when I look at these sales metrics and I reflect upon all the different organizations with which I've worked, I see these same sales metrics again and again done by sales. So before my work in analytics, I did a lot of product management, so I worked a lot with sales. So we can talk about this. Number 1 is sales cycle length. So the length of the sales cycle. You know, today people want things very, very quickly. We want to be able to provide that in a very rapid manner. So as we can shrink the size of the sales cycle, it certainly becomes better. I remember in one company, we did a lot of B2B work, and we would have these year-long sales cycles, and it would drive people nuts because it seemed like this thing would just never end. And we actively tried to shrink that down to 10 months, 9 months, 8 months. So it's certainly something we'll look at. And a big thing that that particular metric gives us, sales cycle length, is discovering any bottlenecks. Because typically the reason why that sales cycle is so long is something's gone wrong. You've got a bottleneck in the system somewhere. Number 2 is percentage achieving quota. So again, this is for sales management. And you're going to have a team that's going to work for you, work for the sales organization. And in there, you need to make sure that everyone on the team at least achieves the quota for sales, maybe even surpasses it. And if you have a consistent number of people falling short of the quota, something's gone wrong. It might be the sales team's responsibility, and a lot of times it's the marketing team's responsibility. One of our jobs in marketing is to make sure that salespeople get the tools they need. Was that ever an issue in your organization that salespeople were complaining that marketing?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. What was that like, Yulia?
Yes. So, salespeople complain about all the data not being available to them.
Right.
And when you're an analyst, sometimes you do not have access to all the data you want. And sometimes it's hard to explain to them that this sales data is just not achievable in some cases. And I do have an example of that. So if you are in California, you know, recent law changes on weed legalization. And
she went there.
And the company that I work for got a request from a client on that sales data. And we were not able to collect it. It's still too early because the law went into effect just in January of this year, and we weren't able to provide the data. But you will run into those all the time.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes like you have partial data and you have to work around it.
You'll have partial data and you have to work around it. Also, a lot of salespeople will go into a new territory or with a new product or with a new service. And one of the jobs in marketing is to make sure that we've provided them with collateral and other tools so that they can engage their customers with those tools. But they can't really do it if we haven't provided it to them. And then all of a sudden their quotas aren't met. Everything falls off the rails. Number 3, lead response time. So, Yulia, have you ever asked someone for, like, you know, a salesperson, hey, can you provide me with this or provide me with that? And it takes weeks for them to get back to you, or at least days.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's so frustrating. And it's like, you know what? If you're a salesperson, you need to jump on those leads because those are gold. And what the Salesforce.com paper is stating here is that lead response time is something you really should measure. Because when people do not follow up on leads quickly, that really points to a very slow sales organization. So number 3, lead response time. Number 4 is opportunity win rate. What that means is of the opportunities given to you, meaning a hot lead, someone ready to buy, all the marketing has gone well, we've, you know, discussed it with sales, everything's ready to go, we think we're going to win that. We want to see at that stage, which Salesforce describes as an opportunity, are we winning those or not? If we are winning those, that's great, we're doing something right, but a lot of times we aren't. And one of the things that Salesforce.com specializes in is measuring the sales process at each stage of the process so that we can analyze where the sales process is breaking down. And certainly one area where it can break down is at the opportunity stage. So we'll be working on a deal for weeks, maybe months, and all of a sudden it just dissolves, it just falls apart. We need to know why, because we really can't afford to do that too many times before things fall off the rails. Another one is average new deal size. Of course, we always want to have deals be large because we have to assign sales resources to them. And we're interested to see if that average new deal size is going up or down. And that, of course, that could depend on the types of products or services that we sell. And it could also be dependent on customer interest and sales capabilities. And then we have number 6 is a mix between small or medium businesses and large enterprises. So they call that the revenue from SMBs versus large enterprises. And I would submit that whether you call it SMBs or large enterprises or one segment versus another segment, we do need to take a look at how sales vary by segment. If almost every company sells to multiple segments, and we need to compare and contrast how those are going. Did you have that at your firms? Lots of different segments, and you tracked where the segments were?
Trying to remember.
I know it, Art.
I did not personally track, but we did have a system in place.
Okay.
And people who'd be tracking that, yeah.
So certainly in the companies where I work, segmentation and segment analysis is something we do very rigorously. And we're always interested to see which segments are working and which aren't. And sometimes it's seasonal. Again, to recap, the 6 metrics, number 1 is sales cycle length. Number 2 is the percentage achieving quota. Number 3 was lead response time. Then we had opportunity win rate. We had average new deal size. And we had revenue by segment, such as small to mid-sized businesses versus enterprises. And then the article goes on and says, if you look at marketing from a different way, from field sales, that's outside sales, versus inside sales, we can look to see how we're using marketing collateral, our cost of sales. A third one that's not mentioned in this article, but I've seen it in other articles, is looking at traditional sales processes. So in a traditional sales process, we look for 4 indicators. They call them BANT. One of them is the business need, then the sense of achievement, and the sense of need, and then the sense of time. We'll get to that a little bit. I want to start looking at some of these other questions. Let's see. So that was number 1. Number 2 was question about module 3. When you, and did you have that piece of paper from module 3?
Yes.
Here it is. When you described, when you take out brand D, I immediately thought Acme brand was the only one with a low standard in flex. And instead of thinking to occupy the empty quadrant, I thought, would it be better to compete in more flex? Why is it not an option to upgrade to 3 out of 5? And then how often does this happen in products? So that one, and thank you very much. Thank you. That happens. So what this person's referring to is positioning, and really looking at the perceptual map as a tool for positioning. In this case, I like to snowboard. I don't know if you guys like to snowboard, but one of the 2 metrics that are used to distinguish one snowboard from another is the shape of a snowboard and the flex. And it's not to say that shape or flex are good or bad. They're just different shapes and flexes for different types of riding. So shape can be almost straight on the side of a snowboard, or it can be very, very much more of an hourglass figure. And they'll have very different turning styles based on the shape. The flex is also similar. The flex says how much does it actually bend when we apply weight on the board. So in general, in terms of flex, if you ride very, very fast, I don't, my brother does. He likes to ride really fast. You want a stiff board. If you ride more slowly, like I used to, you want a nice soft board. That way you can arc into the corners more easily. So then the question is, we have Acme with a shape of 3 out of 5 and a flex of 2 out of 5, and then we have various brands, and then we'll plot out those brands. So for example, Acme was 3 out of 5 for shape and 2 out of 5 for flex. Brand A was 4 out of 5 for shape and 4 out of 5 for flex. So two very different boards for two different writing styles. And then we'll have a 4x4 quadrant like you'll see in the module, and as you'll see in the book in chapter 3, a 3x3 module, excuse me, a 2x2 matrix in this module. And then you'll have that, by definition, the 2x2 quadrant will give 4 quadrants. And then you'll see which quadrant you're in and which quadrant your competitors are in. So each quadrant is going to represent a different type of board. So in the upper right would be boards with high flex and a certain kind of shape. Now that might be good for a certain writing style. On the other quadrants would have high flex and different kinds of shape, maybe low flex and different kinds of shape, and so forth. Each one of those 4, we're not saying that to be in one quadrant is quote unquote the best. What we're really saying is each quadrant represents a different type of board suited for a different type of writer and a different type of writing style. So it's not so much that we want to all be in one quadrant. It's more around, okay, we're going to be the board that's around super high speed, super intense, almost racing level snowboards. I think Burton's a lot like that. Burton likes to have like these really fast snowboards. Mm-hmm. Whereas other boards, they are positioning themselves more as beginner boards, like Oakley boards. Or now we have Oakley fans. We're going to write in. Don't write in. Okay. Don't. Okay. That wasn't meant as snub as Oakley, but in general, Oakley boards tend to be a little softer on the flex, and Burton boards tend to be a little stiffer. There, now I think we're going to get all these nasty comments now. But so it's not to say that Burton's better than Oakley or worse than Oakley. They're just a different kind of board suited for a different kind of writer. So if you're a beginner, I do not want a Burton board. That's just too stiff. I have to go Mach 3 down the hill just in order to make a turn. That's gonna, number one, gonna be very frustrating, and number two, probably lead to injury. And we don't want that. Instead, start on a easy flex board with a very severe cut shape. Start with that, and then graduate toward the board that you want. So in terms of, do we want to upgrade to 3 out of 5? Not necessarily. We don't necessarily want to be in a particular space. The better question would be, what other competitors are in our space? So if we plot our space on a perceptual map and we're right next to another competitor, that's a problem. Because that means that people, they really don't see a perceptual difference between ourselves and others. Yulia, did you buy anything lately that seemed to be where 2 competitors or 3 competitors seem to be identical to each other?
In the ski business, yes, you can see that, especially if you're intermediate rider, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot, and you would not, the difference between those boards would not be that significant to you. So when you work in marketing in the ski industry, so you just have to know your segment, and you have to, so again, since this topic is about positioning, so you have to know like what segment you want to concentrate on, and that's where you want to position yourself in.
Yeah, so the big question would be, number one, where's the market? That's important. But number two, also figure out what you're good at doing. of course, last week, um, GoPro, they announced that they're going to leave the drone business.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, that has just not gone well for them. And on the one hand, it's great that they're now diversifying from just cameras into drones. I guess the problem is that they struggled with drones. There's these great YouTube videos. If you go to YouTube, uh, what people will do is they'll of course mount the GoPro camera on the drone, which is what most people would do. And then apparently the batteries, I read articles that the batteries in the drone would all of a sudden just collapse. They would just discharge without notice, and the drones would crash, right? And there are these hilarious YouTube videos of these drones crashing into all sorts of crazy things. And what I guess GoPro didn't figure out was that, yeah, you need to provide some warning to the operator of the drone that we're running low on battery and you got to bring it in. And I guess GoPro, didn't do that. I don't know all the facts about it, but I guess they didn't do that. So a big part is not just saying, we need to be in a certain area, but having the expertise to do that. You really want to avoid trying to go into an area where you're not good at, only to leave that later when you acknowledge failure. So, because then all of a sudden you wind up in a GoPro situation. So don't do that. So again, of the 4 quadrants, it's not necessarily that you need to be in one. It's looking at, number 1, what you're good at, and number 2, to some degree, what the market size is. So we do want to reflect upon, is the market size in that particular quadrant sufficient? You want to add something?
Yes. And also you have to know your audience and your market and be aware of what people associate your brand name with. Because getting into different quadrant into different, completely different segment can hurt your business as well.
You're exactly right. So one good example of that was Black & Decker. So Black & Decker, they're known as making appliances and blenders, toasters.
Yeah.
And in addition to their home appliance line, they also made a few kind of homeowner tools, like something that you would buy for maybe a non-serious homeowner who maybe wants to hang up a picture on a wall. And they saw that the tool market would be a very lucrative market for them to get into, and they already had good manufacturing capability. And so they tried to actually create a tool line called Black & Decker Professional to go target contractors. And the results were pretty awful. Contractors would look at Black & Decker and say, no, I don't
want that.
I don't want a tool made by a toaster manufacturer. And so they actually wound up changing the name of the tool business, the Black & Decker tool business. They wound up changing the name to DeWalt. DeWalt turned out to be a very powerful name. A success. Now, of course, DeWalt tools are very successful. They're doing very, very well. Because it's so hard getting names now, you're trying to go online and trying to get a new URL.
Everything is taken.
Everything's taken. I think they actually wound up buying a company actually named DeWalt. And, we just want the name. You guys, everything else can go. We really just want the name. And they did that. But now DeWalt tools are revered. And it was exactly what Yuli had said, is that we want to expand into a new area. And we can't do it under our own name. Like I said, there's brand associations with that, which don't help our expansion into that line. So there's that one. Number 3, can we get more examples of metrics and real business? So I would refer you to the Salesforce.com article. Again, one of the things we're looking for is the business need. We're looking for the achievability. We're looking for the needs and timelines. One big thing that we look for is budget. So a lot of
Mhm.
times we'll say, does the prospect person coming in, do we think they have the budget to come in there? So that's one of, in addition to the metrics that we talked about before, that's one of the ones that we look at. Number 4, how do we calculate contribution margin percentage and customer profit? Two very different things. Contribution margin percentage is generally just calculated as the revenue we make per unit, which is the sales price, subtracted from the cost it takes to actually make that unit. We take that subtraction and divide it by the revenue per unit, the price, to get a percentage. What's nice about the contribution margin, which is almost always declared as a percentage. Have you ever worked at a company that didn't use it as a percentage?
I didn't believe so.
I've never seen it. There might be an accounting textbook somewhere that has it not as a percentage, just as a stunt, but it's almost always done as a percentage. What's nice about that is the revenue per unit, the price, that in general is set by marketing. So marketers have complete control over it. And the cost per unit is also set by marketing, because we decide what features to put in it or not put in it. And thus we've now influenced, if not completely decided, the cost structure that product or service is going to have, because both of those two items are under control. We use contribution margin percentage a lot. One of the issues with using something called profit is that I don't know what profit means. Is that profit before taxes? Is that profit before indirect costs? Is that profit before overhead? Is that profit before interest expense? It's too vague a term. So, if you spoke to an accountant or a financier about the word profit, they might have a very different idea than you do. So we try not to use the word profit, and instead we use contribution margin. Now we get to customer profit. That is, again, very specifically defined as all the revenues we make from a customer minus all the costs we have associated with making a customer. In your past business, did you ever have really whiny customers needing a lot of attention?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Tell us about that.
And then sometimes you have to buy the product or service for them or give them extras. So all those would be included in the cost of having the customer.
And how much profit did you make from customers like that?
Some customers would bring zero profit.
Yeah.
So, but there are others who bring the profit, and then your average customer profit ends up being okay.
So one of the things we need to do is monitor profit, ideally on a customer by customer basis. And in many companies in which I worked, we would actually track customer profit as a metric. And certainly airlines do, and other organizations do. And they'll put you in tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I think American Airlines, they do platinum and gold and
airlines
other
always
things,
have those.
because that really shows the customer profitability, or at least the potential customer profitability. Once you get to a point where you're farther down, where you haven't made a lot of money for a company, and B, you keep calling them and harassing them and demanding refunds and demanding this and demanding that. What we would actually do in one previous company I worked at is we would actually fire customers. We would actually actively encourage them to leave. And find another supplier who we believed could serve their needs better. And you see airlines doing that, right? They're saying, you know what, if you want to put a bag on our airline and you're not gold status or platinum status, you can pay an extra $25 for the luggage. Yeah. That's basically saying we really We really don't need you around. Once they start charging you for the luggage, that's pretty clear.
I
That's
guess
pretty
I
clear.
was charged for luggage.
Right. But,
Yeah.
so are you like a platinum member?
No.
See, that would be it.
And now I'm like, oh wait.
I used to have to fly a lot, so I became an executive platinum on one airline, and it was amazing. They would jump through all sorts of hoops. You know, they would say, "Yeah, you know those rules that we say for other passengers, yeah, they don't apply to you. Just if you want to board first, go ahead. Yeah, just do whatever you want." It was great, and then it was hilarious later on.
Yeah.
I just, because of the work change, I didn't have to fly so much. Yeah, that same company, they all those perks went away. All those perks went away. So it really, they because their revenue, the revenue that I brought went away. So I was way farther down in the list. All right. Next is, are there free data sources you can advise? Absolutely. So one great place for data sources is Tableau. So if you go to tableau.com and you click on the resources link, so I think it's tableau.com/resources or something like that. Number one, they have a lot of obviously videos on how to use Tableau, but for each video, they'll have an associated visualization, meaning the graph you're going to draw in Tableau, as well as a nice big data set. And a lot of these data sets are multiple megabytes in size. And what's nice about them is they're almost always non-proprietary. So geographic world populations by country, changes over time. Cell phone usage, in the last 30 years. Different types of disease spreading over the last 30 years. So many different data sets from which you can select. Do you have any additional sources you'd like to share?
I believe there is one called Kaggle, I think.
Yeah, there's Kaggle, right?
Kaggle. So there's a lot of data. Then also all the government websites,
right.
They also have a lot of data available.
So we're broadcasting from the San Francisco Bay Area, and one interesting new data set that the local jurisdiction has put out is on bike share. So one of the things that we're trying to do in this area is advocate the use of more bicycles. And to that, they have these, you see these blue bicycles riding around the city? Yeah. So that's part of the bike share program. And then the big challenge is, where do we put the bicycles? Where's the most convenient place to pick up bicycles and to drop off bicycles? So if you go to, I think it's bikesharesmart.org, something like that. If you Google bike share San Francisco Bay Area, it'll come up. But in there, they track the migration of the bicycles. Each bicycle has got its own GPS. Well, number one, so they can track it.
Yeah.
But number two, so they can find out where people are picking up the bicycles and where they're riding them to, with the idea that over time, we can eventually put in these centers at areas where people naturally migrate. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty interesting.
And that's kind of neat. So in case you're ever interested in the traffic patterns or the transportation patterns of a city, look to the bike share program. Let's see. Next we have, I find that, again, we're reading off the actual questions posed to us by fellow students. I find that in real life situations, marketing cases are more complicated than being simply represented by linear response models. For example, if I have to make budget allocation decisions, there will be a lot of independent variables such as promotional, offering, dollars, sales force, advertising, etc. How can you use models to predict trends given that many variables? You want to cover it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So you still can use linear response model. You can just input more independent variables into it. It does assume that you still have one dependent variable.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And also in general, many of these phenomenon, even if they're not linear across the entire spectrum, are often piecewise linear. And we can just take a look at that. Mainly one of the things that we're trying to find is which variables matter the most. One of the things that I always advocate is to actually plot out the variables first and to see, are they at all linear? If they're not linear, like you said, you can use different order models. I would say that there's a significant overhead with using higher order models. So we tend to not really advocate higher order models as much unless you absolutely need to. I would say instead you want to see what's the range of interest and focus those efforts on your range of interest and just look at the variables within there. But again, we start by actually plotting out the variables and determining the data linearity, and then looking at all of them together, then doing a regression analysis and looking at the p-value. So we did talk about p-values a little bit last time. So the p-value represents the likelihood of the null hypothesis, or that being said, the likelihood that this representation is fictional, that there is no real relationship between the variable that you've selected and the dependent variable. In general, at a 95% confidence level, we're looking at a p-value no more than 5%. That being said, like we talked about last time, the 5% number, the 95% number is a compromise. It's not baked in any kind of a theory. It's not supported by any kind of research that that's the one number you need to use. Rather, it's a compromise between type 1 error and type 2 error. Type 1 being false positive and type 2 being false negative. So we want to address it in that way. We want to address it where 5% is more of a guideline and not so much a hard stop. So number one, plot out all the variables, every single variable against the dependent variable. Number two, pick out that section of data where it is linear and limit yourself to that one area. And then number three, look at all the corresponding p-values of all the different variables and see which ones look good. Which ones look good? Do you ever run into situations where you get very few variables with a p less than 5%?
I would say that's yes, probably. Majority of your variables will depend on the situation, of course, but a lot of times in real practice you will have p-value lower than 95%. So
lower than 5%, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So when you have that, if you're so blessed, then it makes life easy. All right. So hello, I would like to clarify my understanding of two techniques. Thanks again for all the questions, by the way. We're blessed with all these questions. I really appreciate it. So it's great to have these things. So hello, I would like to clarify my understanding of two techniques of sizing the market and identifying the trends. Okay. Should they be used differently according to the market or product, or are they complementary? It's a long question here, so please bear with me. Personally, I see these differences. Sizing techniques, top down, it fits better for those products that could reach to general public. That's mass market as opposed to niche market. For bottom up, this student is saying that's better for niche market. Why? Only for those very specific markets you can identify and add segments. Otherwise, the number of segments will be too big to evaluate. Maybe. The next topic, identifying trends. PESTLE, better fits for new entrants or evaluating new products. Why? Focused on identifying new opportunities. Porter, for established companies or products. Why? It's focused on identifying trends. I think they mean trends. Okay, I'm going to cover those one at a time. It's a long question, so thank you very much for that. So it's really 4 parts, or maybe even 5 parts. top down, bottom up, mortar and pestle. So I'll cover each one of those. I would say before I cover that, I'm going to introduce a new topic, topic 5. So what is the goal of market sizing? The goal of market sizing is to find out how much volume in dollars or euros or rubles or drachma or whatever your currency is, how big is that market as represented by the number of people using it multiplied by the price of that product or service. That's what we're really trying to figure out. Once in a while, in very, very established markets, we can get away with just one type of market sizing approach. That's the exception to the rule. I would say the vast majority of cases, you want to use as many market sizing approaches as possible. In the book, in chapter 2, it's called Market Insight, we talk about at least 4 market sizing types. The first one is government data. Virtually every industrialized nation has statistics as to how much money every industry makes. Why? Why would you do that? In the United States, it's called the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. In the UK, it's the Ministry of Commerce. In Russia, it's called the Goskmostat. Pretty much every industrialized country. Why? Why would they go to all that trouble? And the answer is taxes. We need to know what the tax roll should be. If we don't know how much money to expect, we won't be able to tax citizenry, right? So we're going to have supply and demand, supply being the suppliers, industry, demand being the people who buy it. And we need to make sure that those two balance. And we can't do that if we don't know the statistics for the suppliers. So in the United States, we use something called the NAICS code, N-A-I-C-S, National, excuse me, get in a minute. Excuse me. We use something called the NAICS code to break down the industries into groups, and then further down into individual categories, originally at a 6-digit level, and now I routinely see it at an 8-digit level. And the idea with the NAICS, which is the North American Industry Classification System, that's long. That's why they call it NAICS. That's why no one ever calls it North American Industry Classification System. The reason why we use that is so we have a number to represent it. We can go to government data. We can find out what that industry produced for a particular market with a particular product or service. If we assume that the inventories are not significant, meaning that company buys or rather sells everything that people buy, and that there's no overlap, and we don't have huge mountains of extra product at the end of the year, then we can say that's one method. So the market demand for that one particular good or service done by industry should be the same as what the industry produced. So using government data is one really good way to estimate the size of the market. Again, that makes the assumption that everything that we make, people will buy. What's nice about that is, in general, it's very accurate because it's audited by tax records, which there's bad consequences if you lie in your taxes. April 15th is coming up, so guys will still have to do that. So that's number one. Number two is industry analyst reports. So whenever we're working on a new project, we should always look at what industry analysts are saying about a product or service. Virtually every industry has an analyst. Some have many. For example, the telephone industry, the cellular telephone industry, they have many, many analysts. Probably the best well-known is the MPD group. And there's many, many more that cover that service. Why? Because telephones are popular. A lot of people buy them. People are excited when the new model comes out. I'm excited for the S9, the Galaxy S9. So that'll be cool. And Samsung comes out with that. Then number three, to your point, would be top down. So in top down, we say what percentage of a universal population does our product or service cater to? So the universal population could be the population of the world, the population of our country, the population of healthcare, the population of whatever our relevant population is, that would be it. Going back to the Starbucks coffee example we talked about last time, if we say all the United States is, I think, around 330 million people right now and change. If we say that 10% of those people drink coffee, then that would be 33 million people. What's nice about top down is that it's easy. How long did that take? 2 minutes. I mean, not even that. It takes me longer to describe it than it does to actually make the calculation. What's bad about top down? What's bad about top down is we really haven't learned that much. I don't really know who actually drinks coffee. I mean, people like coffee. Well, that doesn't do me a lot of good. If I'm running a coffee store, I don't really know much more than I did to begin with. The other thing that we find with top down is that in general, it tends to be very optimistic, meaning the numbers that we get for top down are higher than the actual market demand. Why is that? Because you make so many assumptions. Why is it 10%? You know, why isn't it 9.3%? I don't know. That's just some number we came up with. So that's a big problem. Again, optimism and the market insight, they're lacking on top down. But the good news is that it's easy. Is it good to use top down for consumer goods? I guess it's okay. It's no better or worse than anything else. Certainly, if it's an established consumer good and that consumer good has been in demand for 50, 60, 70, 80 years, the chances of it having around the same demand are pretty good. The chances of being able to get ratios are, I guess, okay. Which is why we have number 4, bottom up. So bottom up is the opposite of top down. Whereas in top down, we start with the universal population and we multiply by successive factors to get to a smaller and smaller value. And bottom up, we have a number of different segments and we add up those segments to come up with the general amount of the market. What's bad about this approach is that we have to then figure out for every single segment that we have what that size is, which is a lot of work. What's great about it, though, is that we really learn a lot about the segment. So if you go back to that coffee example, people who drink coffee at 5 o'clock in the morning. Can you believe this? A lot of Starbucks are open at 5 o'clock in the morning. Do you ever go to coffee that early?
No, but probably that would be a segment that most likely starts working early.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be like construction industry workers, for instance.
Right.
I feel like they tend to start really early. So,
right.
So again, it gives you an idea of what your segments are. And as Stefan mentioned in the beginning, you rarely want to use just one market sizing technique. You want to use multiple.
Yeah, and I would say at this 5 o'clock hour, is that, so think about the insight you're getting into that group. So if it's in construction market, is that the time when you do your advertising? Do you say, hey, people that are getting coffee at 5 o'clock in the morning, we have a new half calf decaf chai latte unicorn drink? Would that work? Probably not.
Most likely not.
I don't think that's going to be, I don't think that's showing a lot of marketing insight. On the other hand, what if I said, hey, people who drink at 5 o'clock in the morning, we have extra shots of caffeine for free?
That would probably fly.
We have extra shots for free? Yeah, now we're interested. Why? Because that's what they want. They really need that pick me up in the morning. to do that. So to Yulia's point, that's why we do all four, if at all possible. We want to do all four. We want to get not just the size, we want to also get the insight. We want to find out what's going on. And because each of the four different approaches has strengths and weaknesses, the more we can blend them all together, the better it works. Then the big question that I get a lot, maybe you get this as well, how do I blend them? How do I blend them? So I got four estimates. How do I blend them? Man, in the past, when I first started out, I went crazy. I was getting all proportional. You know, I think this number's really good, and that number's not quite so good. Now big percentages on this one and small percentages on that one. And then I would have these long, dragged out fights with my boss and his boss and her boss and another boss. Why did you use that number? Why didn't why'd you use 35% weight instead of 32% weight? Oh my goodness. It just takes me down a rat hole. And eventually I just made everything the same. If I have 4 units, I just make them all 25%. And because actually, number one, there is no one way that works 100% infallibly all the time. Number two, you want to get that diversity of opinion. And number three, you avoid that whole conversation about what those weightings should be. Do you ever do that? Do you ever get any conversations about what the weightings should be?
Yes, in the forums of this course all the time, actually.
All right. Okay. And what do people like to see in terms of the weightings?
Most often they want to see pretty much the average, just because it's the easier concept to grasp.
Right. So, and I would say that the average also is consistent with the whole notion of performing multiple calculations. Because the reason why we perform multiple calculations, why we do multiple approaches, is so that we can get that insight, we can get that diversity of opinion, which will give us a much better answer. So moving on, we have Pestle and Porter. Does Pestle better fit new entrants or evaluating new products? Maybe. I would argue that Pestle, which is political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental trends, I think they're good for both new products and for mature products. For new products, usually doing Pestle will identify an opportunity. So if we find some change in the new tax law, or some change in demographic, or some change in technology, Pestle will flag that right away and will give us, I guess, some insight into how to attack that market. That being said, a lot of mature industries could benefit from doing Pestle because we're not in a stable time. I mean, things change so much. Look back at when we first did the first run of this course is way back in 2015. And man, things have really changed since 2015. So I would submit that in today's day and age, things are changing so quickly that even if you're a mature industry, you can't rest on your laurels. You can't just sit around and do nothing all the time. You have to continually update and be relevant to the times. Do you ever see that in your stuff? You ever have to update or change things to be more relevant with what's going on now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
yeah, and I mean, can you imagine using an iPhone? So for those of you watching, how many people are watching now with an iPhone 3 in your hands? I'm guessing not many, because it's changed so much. Can you imagine if Apple said, you know what, I don't think we're going to release any more iPhones. I think the Apple iPhone X10 is pretty good. That should do it. Well, that would be a disaster. So we can't, we have to continue being adaptive to the times. In terms of Porter, that's named after Michael Porter, the Harvard professor. And he called on 5 key forces, and we can look at those. I would say the student asks, is this more relevant for established companies or products? Maybe. It's hard to say. Again, I would use that for new products. I would say the biggest force I find for Porter, and they talk about, power buyers, power suppliers, substitute products, all that. The biggest one I find is the sustainable competitive advantage. Ideally, something that nobody else has. If you're a fan of Warren Buffett, they call that the moat. So what makes it so that you can produce something and no one else can? That's huge, because now we can replicate almost anything in software. And Warren looks for the moat because it's not that hard to make some items, and yet it makes it hard to actually sell them because of people's brands, because of their intellectual property, of these other relationships that you might have with different organizations. So it's important to have that moat. Actually, I believe there's a new ETF that has been formed. It's actually called Moat. It basically consists of all these companies with, big IPs or big brands or something, making it really difficult to become a new entrant into that industry. Because people like Elon Musk are the exception to the rule. There are going to be people like Elon Musk who say, it's hard to break into the automotive industry because there's a big moat, because of all the money required. He did it, but I would say he's the exception to the rule. And then last question was, hello, I'm in industrial engineering from Peru. Hello, Peru. By the way, we did some analysis on the makeup of the course, and this course actually goes out to 181 countries. So thank you, everyone. Peru being one of them. I'm eager to learn about strategic marketing because I want to work in this area. Outstanding. I want to know if it's correct to calculate my area market demand, not considering the market share of the big companies. So area market demand is a percentage or a portion of an overall market demand for a particular geographic area. To say whether it includes the market share of big companies, the whole point of looking at market demand is we don't necessarily look at the market share of all the companies. Rather, the market size is the market size available for everyone. So again, a forecast is just for one company, whereas a market size is for all the companies to share. So you're by definition, once you calculate the market size, you will be sharing that with big companies, with small companies, with medium-sized companies. I think a different question that you could ask would be, in what area would I not have to share my market size? And there you could think of, well, maybe there's a niche within that overall market that has been unserved by some of the bigger companies. Can you think of anything, niches like that? Things that you bought that regular big companies don't provide?
Small niches, let me think.
So for example, Apple sells the iPhone, but it doesn't sell all the apps. And think about all the apps out there.
Oh yeah.
I think there's 1.5 million apps on the App Store. 1.5 million.
I don't even know.
Crazy. And there, there's not just Evernote, like a big calendaring scheduling tool. There's niche upon niche upon niche upon niche. Why? Because they know that they'll sell them. Someone out there maybe has a unique scheduling need. Maybe they're involved in a particular geographical area or for a particular need, and we can justify that if we can find the customers. So that's all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much for providing your questions. We really appreciate that. Keep those questions coming. Keep those comments coming in the comments and forum sections, and we look forward to seeing you again at a future live session event. Yuli, would you like to say a few parting words?
I also would like to thank all of you for joining us today, and I hope we addressed all of your questions or a majority of them. If some of them got left unanswered, please don't hesitate to repost them in the discussion forum, and they'll be addressed shortly.
Thanks again, and goodbye for now.
Thank you for joining us again.